Slow down, Five. All in good time. In fact, now that you finally agreed to work with us, you've got all the time in the world.
Hey, Mr. Five here, and welcome to Five Talks. If this is your first time joining us, Five Talks is a little bit about personal views on politics, government, little educational views and films, different hodgepodge of conversational pieces on my little own personal podcast. The reason why today I wanted to speak about this great city that I live in, New York City, and why you should be supporting people directly impacted. Well, today is Giving Tuesday. But today we also have 316,000, 2,400 infected with coronavirus, COVID-19 in New York City. We have over 24,000 deaths. We're in a pandemic. You know, when this pandemic started, let me say this. Incarcerated Nation Network is a network of post-incarcerated leaders that all operate projects that serve those directly impacted and basically serve those who are incarcerated, previously incarcerated, and their families. And the reason why we do this is because we've come from those circumstances, and most of us advocate from a point of direct experience. When I mean direct experience, I mean that most of us have been through the conditions that we advocate against. Most of us have been through the cruel and unusual punishment and torture and the conditions that we're trying to change. I myself have incubated and started a numerous amount of projects. Besides, all I do is support post-incarcerated leaders. Justice impacted and post-incarcerated leaders support justice impacted and post-incarcerated people. We have a principle that heal people, and we utilize that principle because we have a firm belief and human resilience. We have a belief that those most directly impacted by the issue is superbly and most qualified to not only know the problems of that issue, but to dismantle it and bring it to humane level. And so in New York City, people suffer when they come home. We have about 200,000 people that cycle through our city jail systems. We have unique spaces in New York. We have an entire island, which is like 400 acres of prime real estate. That 400 acres is dedicated to incarcerating New York City citizens. We have 11 city jails. We have a floating jail in the Bronx. We have a federal facility, MDC, which basically then became a city facility, but basically is like called the Tombs. We have Manhattan House. We have Brooklyn House. We have a whole intricate system of these signature attraction torture locations because New York City was the first. Now, I'm not even going to go into Rikers because it's a whole nother segment. Also, Rikers was built in 1650. So we're talking about before the first state penitentiary, we had a world's largest penal colony, the world's largest jail. And so throughout all of this, surviving this, disenfranchisement, coming home, struggling, trying to get their life on track, directly impacted and post-incarcerated leaders put all of that to the side and help to serve others. Help to make this city a better place. Help to serve the younger generation in this community. Most of us are mentors and uniquely mentor youth who are directly impacted. And so that's what Incarcerated Nation Network is, a collective of all these projects, all these great, amazing people who have all these different lanes and advocacy and different sort of tracks of justice. So you have from juvenile justice to aging in prison, right? But in between all of that, you have the leaders who suffer the most, who really can't get conventional funding, and the projects and sort of advocacy streams and the way we approach things is from an abolitionist point of view. And you can watch the video about abolition versus reform to get a better understanding of the difference of that. Reforming something is making it stronger, and we're not just out just to cut the prison system in half and that's it. We are trying to abolish this system that has basically put a monetary value on human lives and black bodies. This system has disproportionately affected people of color more, of course, nationally. And then we have torture situations like solitary confinement in New York. And amidst all of that, in tourists and 20 million commuters every day, directly impacted people get up every day and dedicate their life to taking care of others and supporting this city's most marginalized people, those returning citizens who are constantly disenfranchised from public service, from public health, from social services, and also from the 1,900 something laws that New York State has created through disenfranchisement. Basically, a report with the Brennan Center called Jim Crow in New York about that. And I'll put a link up in the description. But why should you support those directly impacted? Because supporting a post-incarcerated leader is supporting everyone that's in the network. We don't just take care of ourselves, we take care of our youth. We have the Young Adult Peer Provider Project, which under it designs and establishes academies and operate them that all last 5 years. What is the hardest thing in New York City for kids? They get 6 months at Rikers and 5 years on probation. Let me ask you this. What program lasts for 5 years in New York? What program supports you for the entire correctional period? The time that they're under community supervision for 5 years. What program does that? I mean, we have Arches that lasts for 6 months, so it gives your nonprofit organization a small stipend. You're able to pay the kids like $15 a day. You get a little bit of funding, and hopefully from the notoriety of that, you can get greater funding. That doesn't happen. 6 months, you're just getting to know that kid. 6 months, I'm just starting to find out that his socioeconomic status may start at home, that some of his difficulties may happen because of where his living environment is, or the fact that he's homeless, or the fact that he might have been shot before, or the fact that he's had extreme violence and witnessed mass incarceration and of his entire family and people of his color, and witnessed microaggressive racism and police brutality on a daily basis. But mostly because during this pandemic, it has been directly impacted credible messengers. It has been directly impacted post-incarcerated leaders. It has been directly impacted mentors, activists, organizers who are doing the frontline work. Now, you are talking to a person who helped to establish the emergency networks in New York City, right? So the Citizens Emergency Response Network, which my Uncle Wally helped created and started, really became a collective of COAD community organizations. A COAD is community organizations, businesses, projects, all in that district. But what it does is it creates and establishes an emergency network run by the citizens, because it's called the Citizens Emergency Response Network, after HEN, which was the Harlem Emergency Network, and then we created the South Bronx Emergency Network to sort of handle the poorest district in America, New York 15. And so what a COAD is it allows for citizens to come together and pull all the resources they need aside from government. Like, what if government falls down today? Well, with Trump, it's always falling down, but what if it just collapsed, right? How are citizens going to survive? What if natural disasters come? And so we've been working with FEMA, the Department of Emergency Management, because our systems and our organizations and our projects are all designed in the ICS, which is the Incident Command System, which is basically how FEMA and all the other government organizations run. And so creating these emergency networks was my first step to creating an inter-community control in which critical messengers can then extend to doing emergency services, where then directly impacted post-incarcerated leaders can expand to doing critical services. And it basically creates another layer of public health out there to support and help community, especially in New York. New York has always been a city of great community, and we've always come together to support those who are most marginalized. We also a city that have the most millionaires, and we have a mayor and a governor who very importantly created this trend of, which, don't get me wrong, I'm totally for it. I'm for it because it's trauma informed, right? It's the ability to say, I am locked in my house, I'm quarantined every day, but my state leader and my city leader are on TV reassuring me of that information that's happening day by day. So I, as a citizen, I'm informed. I love that approach. I mean, the guy won like an Emmy for it or something, right? But what the governor, Cuomo, and what the mayor, Bill de Blasio, is not doing is actually talking about black people, because that's the majority of people locked up in New York State, and people of color who are impacted by this virus who are locked in prisons and jails. We live in a society where punishment is the only justice you can get. Somebody does something to me, the system, all they can do is offer is disappearing that person and hurting that person on my behalf, and then I pay for it out of my tax dollars for that person suffering, and basically send him to another county so that he's in pain. So revenge is the only justice system we have, right? But I'm talking about the fact that it has directly impacted CBOs who are on the front line in organizations and post-incarcerated leaders like myself who are out there every day doing PPE, who are out there every day providing meals. In the Bronx, we created a whole Bronx network doing like 15,000 meals a day in the Bronx alone, another 22,000 in Harlem, like, because these are our people. We see them every day. This is second nature for us. And then we created this whole test and trace board because we wanted to create the system. And don't get me wrong, I'm going to lead that board. And it's a lot of difficulties. There's a lot of difficulties because we all don't trust this drug, but we need to have this vaccine that's moving forward. We need to also sort of all come together as into who's doing the work and how we can support them. I believe that failed a few times. One, health and hospitals funded CBOs, not really CBOs, but corporations or organizations that were priorly funded by them or priorly had business connecting with them. That to me doesn't prioritize who can actually give the most expansive service to the community they know, because it's people they know. So they failed on that. And then they gave another round of funding to basically another system of CBOs, which were connected to them. They were doing assisted services, right? And so it becomes this sort of favoritism in a city where the citizens aren't best at help, right? I live in New York 15, where every day we seen the mayor come on TV and talk about how the Bronx is the worst and 80% infection rate. First, we had to fight you to get the test done. That's a whole other story. 2, we collaborated and organized all the testing sites and waited until April, May, June, until you decided to do testing in an 87, 85% infection rate for the entire Bronx. You didn't even dedicate mass and services to that district. We're so worried about who's going to be elected. Richie Torres won, but nothing is being done for the district. There is no stable solutions and systems put into place that's going to help, one, curb the violence and extreme violence from NYPD and retaliation of people's opinions when they voice it. 2, test and trace only works if you trust the person to follow up. If I don't know you, you're Jill from Connecticut, and you're coming to my building talking about I may be infected. First of all, I don't trust you. Number 2, I'm not going to follow up and listen to what you say because you're not considering the socioeconomic status of my house. Maybe I can't leave and go to a hotel for 2 weeks. Maybe I'm financially bound by the struggle and survival of everyday tactics. So that tactics lead up to what? Dinner on the table. If I don't go through that, there's no dinner on the table. And so I think a lot of socioeconomic components was missing. A lot of support to give to the initial CBOs is missing. But throughout all this, you have all of these credible messengers, all these directly impacted people like us who have the Incarcerated Nation Credible Message Institute. And we're out there every day providing, servicing beyond what the state and government gives us because they don't give us nothing. And so I say, think about your donations today. Think about what you're doing moving forward and who you support. Are they supporting people on the ground? Are the people that you're supporting, how have they impacted people directly impacted in their lives? How have they contributed to the freedom and abolition of the prison industrial complex? We still sort of categorize people as profit, as money, because black people were money. We were a commodity. We were traded as a stock and a bond. We were physically the Wall Street trades, right? With all of this immense history in New York, with all of this sort of trauma in New York City, with all of this responsibility doing damage to our most marginalized people, we have more millionaires growing up. We have more city organizations. Instead of supporting the organizations that already exist, the city will copy to make another one. It's those post-incarcerated leaders who are doing the work and paving the way. And so I say, think about your support, and if you're supporting somebody who's supporting somebody else. You know, as a pioneer, as a creator, and I say pioneer because not everybody thinks about doing the things we've done, right? I've passed dozens and dozens of pieces of legislation because I know how to get everybody in the room to work together. Knowing how to organize means that it's not just me, it's not just 5 writing some whole bill, but I can call about 4, 5, 6 people that are prominent enough to get this written done, right? So when I bring it to the legislator, his legislative aide is not cursing me out or fussing me out like, 5, I'm so tired of you with all these bills you want to pass. But it also takes us to stay on top of those legislations. I'm gonna give you an example. During the pandemic, we had the mayor running around. He hired this one activist from Harlem to then go to every borough and bring people like they were from that borough. They painting murals, passed a couple of bills that we wrote and supported. Shout out to Vanessa Gibson, who supported these bills and created them and created the sort of safe space to have them pushed and launched and advocated for it. One of those was the chokehold bill, which of course the city council was like, yes, nobody should be chokehold, in these dramatic tweets. And I love Corey's tweets and, oh my God, this is shameful. But then the first person to be like, well, what technically is a chokehold, and asphyxiation and sort of decompressing your sternum so that it stops you from breathing, how can we arrest somebody without doing that? Okay, there's some jobs you just can't be bad at. And being a cop, you just can't have, a few rotten apples. No, there is no bad days. I'm going to give you an example. If you're a pilot, pilots can't have bad days. You can't be a bad apple pilot. Oh man, 20 people died in this crash. Well, Jimmy, he was a bad apple, but that doesn't represent all of us. He's just one of us. And so as a city, we have to support those who support others in our city. As a nation, we should support those who are most directly impacted in our nation. If that's the case, then my district would be the most supported. I live in New York 15. I'm not even going to say most. All of the work that we do comes out of our pocket and advocating. We're launching a few business lines. It's going to help subsidize that so that people can come in and purchase products or support our stores or buy our coffee and eat our food or shop and sort of patronize our food trucks. That way they're supporting the income that goes to pay the youth their salaries, but also help people reintegrate back into society. It's a lot left on our shoulders because throughout these TV shows that the mayor and governors are saying, they're not specifically stating the facts. They're not including people directly impacted in prisons as a population of these COVID-19 victims. And so when you talk about microclusters and these people there, the facilities have a for sure way of addressing solitary. This pandemic and infections. What they did is that they put people in solitary. I get 15 to 20 calls every day not every day, but when they allow them out for the phone, from Elmira, from Coxsackie, from Auburn, and people are just dying. Staff members are in the hospital. Remember, Elmira was half their staff in the hospital. Who's thinking about them? When did they not become state citizens? When did the 20,000 recycle as pre-detention detainees on Rikers who were just too poor to bail out? Why are we disenfranchising them and excluding them like they're not human? So when we say, the infections are down, but the prisons are 90%, 80%, all 50-something facilities in 62 counties and 900-something county facilities, and of course 11 of the city's worst jails, and including the whole island. We have a floating jail, we have another federal facility, that's not even including the private prison in the state. We are a prison state. And we don't care about them. And so as I'm going through this test and trace board and we're in the vaccine part, and it's why is the federal government paying for this to give to the employees, which they're saying they're citizens, but won't give to the people directly impacted who are in that facility, which are basically paying for it by their bodies? Are they not human beings? Once you're incarcerated, are you still not a citizen? Does the governor check you off as 3/5 of a man, as slavery, which we still constitute people as? And then we put people in the most egregious form of torture and punishment. So now that you're infected with COVID-19, they're not giving you anything to medically treat that. But I'm going to put you in this box by yourself on a block full of infected people with all air and ventilation gone, right? And so you're there for 2 weeks, and then 13 days, the day before you leave out, I'll bring in 5 more sick people. It's a reinfecting process, and it really makes no sense. And so I'm saying all of this because we have to start supporting ourselves and supporting the systems that work. And so when you're donating and when you're giving this season, think about those directly impacted, Think about who's really working to help New Yorkers. Think about who's providing public health and public safety. And think about who's helping those most marginalized. Now, of course, I could be here talking about a myriad arrays of academies and programs and alternative to incarceration programs and housing and this whole social justice bank we're building and the Black Panther Cafe that we're constructing and buying. Like, all of that is great. But even if you don't choose to support the Incarcerated Nation Network, support a directly impacted leader who is doing the work on the ground, putting their own socioeconomic status to the side, putting their own trauma, their daily post-traumatic stress disorder to the side, and say, this is not about me, and I know I'm bad off. I just can't let that be an excuse to not help this person, because I know what they're going through and nobody else does. And so I want to close out by saying I love you. And if you're doing this work, I love you even more. And we have to start creating that bridge in which we're all working together, because that is the only way that we can make change. Capital, we change throughout the process, but it's only together that we're going to achieve this. In New York City, it's going to be together that we're going to end solitary confinement. It's going to be together that we stop just locking up kids and spending about $8 billion a year just incarcerating kids alone. It's going to be together that we're going to have equality, that we're going to create fair housing, that we're not going to have 60 to 100,000 homeless kids every night. This is why Incarceration Nation Network is building housing, is working on development, programs that actually work, and academies that in governance, but also mentor our youth during their most hard times. Because we've been through that. If somebody was there for us, we would not have the trauma, the pain, the suffering, and the triggers that we live with every day. If we don't do it, who's going to do it? Thank you for listening. Hit that subscribe button. Also, if this video felt any way to you, please hit the like button and think about donating to our nonprofit fundraiser as we work to create more educational videos, support our youth network. This is Five. This has been Five Talks, and this is just the way I kind of see it. Heal people, heal people.